Hello and welcome to A Grain of Sanderson, a podcast where we are foolishly reading all of Brandon Sanderson's works in publication order. I am joined by Taylor Lane.
Hello.
And Jack McLaughlin.
Hello. We are Graham's podcasting aspects.
Yes, indeed. Joining me are my two podcasting aspects. I wish I had a bit for Allomancer Jack, but I don't. Today we read all of Allomancer Jak and Legion Skin Deep. I don't even know where to begin with either of these.
I think they were fun. I think they were fun, but there's also not... Well, I think there's a lot to say about Legion.
I think there's some conversation to be had about Legion. I think Allomancer Jak is very bad.
Really? I quite enjoyed it. I had a nice time.
Mine might be colored by doing the audiobook version of it, and I'll explain that later.
Which
That's fair.
would be really interesting if you had a worse impression as an audiobook.
Yes.
Because some background stuff we'll get into when we get to that episode.
Yes.
Not episode, book. You know what I'm talking about.
This episode.
Yes.
Yes.
Later.
Welcome to A Grain of Sanderson.
Okay, so I think we're going to get started with Legion Skin Deep. This is the second book. We talked about Legion last year sometime. I honestly don't even remember when we read the first one.
I think it was summer.
It was the same episode as Emperor's Soul.
Okay, that came out in
Oh
June
my God.
or maybe
Yeah.
July.
It was, I think at the time we were saying that episode would be the most important to understanding Brandon Sanderson as a writer. The combination
Yeah.
of Legion and Emperor's Soul.
Yeah, I still kind of stand by that.
This one does not open cold shooting Osama Bin Laden's photo
Yeah.
on the wall. That I don't think I'll ever live. Like, I don't think Sanderson will ever live that down in my head, at least.
It also doesn't end with seeing a photo of Jesus.
No.
Well, it doesn't end non-religiously.
Oh, no, that's true. It does end very religiously. I was stressed the entire time reading this because I was so worried we were going to go to, and suddenly Christ is here again.
And suddenly the image of Christ is now encoded in the E. coli bacteria on it wasn't E. coli, it was something else. Staph bacteria on all of our skins. Anyway, I've converted to the religion of infinite Batmans.
All of these are things that are in the text.
I wrote the summary and I can just jump straight in. Skin Deep begins with Stephen leads on a date, which is quickly deteriorating as his aspects are present and he can't help but be honest about his condition with the woman. After telling her that his aspects are nearby, and that he is indeed technically insane but not crazy, the date leaves to go to the bathroom and doesn't return. When leaving the restaurant later, Stephen's aspect JC, the one that was shooting Osama Bin Laden in the first book, notices that a notorious assassin Zen is watching him at the same restaurant. When he gets outside, he discovers Yor, an eccentric business owner whom Stephen has worked with before, waiting for him. Yor asks for Stephen's assistance in recovering the body of a recently deceased employee that was stolen from the morgue. During this introduction, we are introduced to a new element of Stephen's condition. Not only does he have all of his aspects, but they each experience their own insanities that have been getting worse over time. These run the range of Tobias having schizophrenia, Ivy having trypophobia, Ngozi being a germaphobe, and probably JC's extreme borderline comedic racism. Yor takes Stephen to I3, the biotech company that the deceased scientist Panos worked at. There, Stephen and his aspects learn that the company was working on a way to encode data into people's cells, and a viral delivery method for interacting with it. During testing, it turned out that this virus would cause cancer. Panos had died in a skiing accident and had the data of how to develop this virus encoded in his DNA, and his body was now missing. Yor needs Stephen to track down the body before whoever stole it can figure out how to extract and decrypt the data. Stephen leaves as the I3 is put into lockdown by the feds, and returns home where he enters his white room, a place with zero distractions that allows him to bring in all 40-something aspects together. They work the problem all night, going over all the records and the information that they have on I3 and the missing body. During this time, we are introduced to Audrey, an aspect that's an expert in handwriting and the most self-aware of being imaginary. Stephen reads a cryptography book, and rather than it creating a new aspect, Audrey gains that knowledge instead, which has never happened before. Next, he goes to the morgue where the body was stolen, bringing his normal team of Tobias, Ivy, and JC along with Audrey. Along the way, JC notices they're being followed, and Audrey uses her new spycraft skills to figure out if it's the assassin from earlier. Stephen relies on JC's guidance to ditch the car and get the drop on his stalker, discovering not the assassin but Panos' little brother Dion. Stephen gets his butler to babysit Dion while he goes to investigate the morgue, where with the help of JC FaceTiming some other aspects, another first, Stephen discovers that people impersonating the family priest and cleaning lady came to steal the body. When leaving, he is ambushed by Zen the assassin, but is able to escape with the help of a fat security guard. He makes a very good guess that the rival company Exotech is probably behind this, and he moves on to go talk to Panos' family, hoping they might have info on where the decryption key is. This basically goes nowhere except reminding us that religion is important. There is a lot of conversation about God, about trusting institutions, about what Panos may or may not have been doing, and how truthful Yor and I3 may or may not be. At some point, Stephen realizes that Audrey isn't actually self-aware. Her insanity is just that she believes she's imaginary. Work that one out. Stephen realizes he'll have to probably target Exotech now in a big epic showdown, and so starts placing calls to his butler and Yor with instructions, and later a number of informants and tabloids. They go to Denny's, where Stephen has to buy 4 extra meals for all of his aspects, and shortly after, he and Dion are kidnapped by Zen. She, having read extensively on Stephen's condition, is able to trick him into leaving behind all of his aspects except Audrey. She brings him and Dion to a cabin in the woods and locks them in a cellar to sweat and talk about God, death, and infinite Batmans. Stephen then pushes Audrey to dig deep and pull up some of the information he has somewhere in his subconscious, and Audrey is able to figure out where the body is. Before she can clarify, Zen comes down to kill Stephen. He stalls her by psyching her out with the prospect of all of his aspects haunting her, which actually works to rattle this trained assassin. Before she can recover, she gets a call and then turns around and starts calling Stephen Sir. Turns out his plan was to tank Exotech's stock with the rumors he had spread, and then his butler bought 60% shares in the company in Stephen's name, making him the president of Exotech, Zen's employer. Having defeated an assassin with ghost stories and a hostile corporate takeover, he goes to confront the true thief of the body, Panos' mother. Her Greek Orthodoxy would not allow her to let the body be cremated, so she had conspired with the family priest to steal the body and bury it in her garden. The police are on their way, but Stephen assures her that she'll be fine because the bodies are not property, and so this wasn't technically a theft, which is not true. I looked it up, and it's actually a very serious felony carrying a sentence of up to 10 years in prison depending on the jurisdiction. Stephen gives her an idea of how to maybe keep the body in cold storage for a few years instead of cremating it, which gives Panos' mother some comfort. Before he leaves the house, however, he finds the secret cubby that Panos hid the flash drive with the decryption key in. In the epilogue, we learn that the cancer virus was a lie by Yor to increase the urgency of finding the body. Investigating the flash drive, however, Stephen discovers that Panos had encrypted information, but not in his body, but rather in a strain of staph bacteria, which at this point has spread to everyone he shook hands with and likely much further than that. It is implied that whatever is encoded in the bacteria is potentially world-changing or destroying. Stephen decides to not share this with Yor or I3, but instead investigates it himself and maybe give it to Panos' little brother when he graduates and starts his own biotech firm.
One just small detail that I think is really funny is the beginning of this book, Mr. Leeds is on a date, and his date is like, "Oh, so you're like Batman." And he goes, "No." And his aspects go, "No." And then the rest of this book is explaining how he is actually Batman. They have 2 distinct conversations about Batman, and then also he has a special butler who helps him all the time. And it's like, oh, fuck off, Sanderson. Your OC is not Batman.
He's an expert in everything. He's really smart and cool.
Rich.
Yep. The corporate takeover is one of the most annoying twists.
I loved it derogatorily. It was so...
Why do you say annoying?
Because here's the thing. I think Legion is probably an okay screenplay, this book, but is not a very good book because doing that kind of corporate takeover, when we don't have Stephen Leeds' interiority, it would make sense for him to just be like, and this was my secret plan. But otherwise, the only secret plan foregrounding we have is Stephen turning to his butler and going, "I have a secret plan. Carry it out." And then later we see the secret plan happen. Okay, if we're getting his point of view, it's very weird to do it this way. Whereas if we were just watching a movie and we see Stephen whisper to his butler, we're like, ooh, he's doing something secret. And one of those things where it's like, in a different medium, I would be less annoyed by this, but having interiority, I'm like, this is dumb.
Especially it being first person.
I love that twist because most of the book so far was a lot less bizarre than the first Legion. Not that there weren't bizarre elements, but it was a little more straightforward. It's also twice as long as the first Legion.
Yeah, I was surprised.
But that ending twist, that was like, yes, the Legion I loved. This kind of like really, really, really bizarre turnaround. Defeating an assassin with a hostile corporate takeover. And also, more importantly, rattling her by convincing her that his aspects might haunt her when he dies. And the reason this works is because of one line where he says, "You can't study me without going a little crazy yourself."
Yeah.
That's the Legion we know and love.
Yeah, this one was about twice as long as the first Legion. The majority of it was actually written on a plane, and a lot of it handwritten, just on various plane rides he had while, doing tours and book signings.
That's always interesting to me when, like, a big established author still handwrites stuff. I think all of Coraline was handwritten.
I don't know how often he handwrites otherwise, but this, I found like one note. And also, as I was saying before the podcast, Legion is a kind of odd because normally I like to peruse some of the surrounding meta context of the books we read, like, the interviews, the what was going on, like trivia, what he said about the book, words of Brandon, things like that. Both Legion books are hard to find a lot on. There's not a lot of discussion on Reddit by fans. There's not a lot of interviews. There's like some reviews of the book, and then there's occasional posts on his own website when he, for example, announced these books, or I think there was the one where he announced that there might have been some kind of signing deal for these. But overall, the Legion stories are probably the most under the radar stuff of Sanderson.
Which is weird given how much he cares about them. He cares so deeply about them. Again, let me pull up the beginning of this book for the description. Because I think he says, in some ways, these are my most personal. Which, I'm making a cold shot right here because I do actually think that the natural evolution for this is like, so much of this seems to be about Sanderson's creative process. Taylor, you soul read him at the beginning of the last episode about it. This is how he thinks of being an author, is you have all these characters in your head and you're listening to them converse, and then you're writing all that stuff down. How they interact, how they bounce off of each other, that sort of thing. And I'm making the cold shot now that this series concludes with, I have to write their stories down. And now Stephen Leeds is a successful author in addition to being Batman. Because, like, that's the most Sanderson way to go.
No, he's not going to write them down. An aspect's going to write them down. That aspect named Brandon.
No, that's too far even for him. But I think...
Author aspect Brandon.
I think it has to be Steven who writes it down, because that's the Sanderson insert character of like, I am a normal person, but there's all of these huge eccentrics in my head.
It is interesting to dig a little more into the whole, this is how he views being an author, or dig into like what he thinks about the aspects, because this story a lot more was about that whole system breaking down. How Steven's psychology and the limits of it and the problems. Because in Legion, the first one, he was relatively stable. He had the aspects, he had the rules they worked with. I think even in that book, there was the implication that he once lost an aspect, and that was a big deal. This story goes a lot more into, to my mind, this story was a lot less about the mystery, and I'll get into my thoughts about the mystery later. But this one was a lot more about the limits of the aspects, where the pressure points are, where the problem points are. There's a lot of scenes, like one, I'm pretty sure this was just introduced in this book. But the idea of all of his aspects also being insane in their own way, although it was a little bizarre what he was all lumping together as insanities. One of his being a severe germaphobe was held up exactly the same as an insanity as another having schizophrenia.
Yes. So to elaborate on this a little bit further, it's established in the previous book that some of them have these things. And he makes the joke of, like, my aspects are insane, but I'm not. So we've seen that Tobias has a hallucination of an alien.
Or that was a man in a satellite. Like a man in a weather satellite.
Okay,
Same
yeah.
thing.
That sort of thing. We've had that before, but it was not given, like, this organization that it's given here. The other thing that I wanted to pick up is, over the years I couldn't leave Stephen Leeds alone. As of this writing, Legion is the only original story novella of mine that I've ever given a sequel. There was something intoxicating about the brew that you'll find in these pages. Somehow, these were both fleet and airy mysteries and explorations of my own psychology, and they were cathartic to write. Welcome breaks from other projects, and in some ways, the most personal stories I've ever done. The third one in particular.
Oh my god.
The other thing that is in here that I think is really important, psychology as superpower is a recurring theme in my works. I've always believed that the personality traits that make us each distinctive, the way we process information, the way we motivate ourselves, the way we shelter our psyche from the bad while learning to cherish the good, can be our greatest strengths or our most dramatic limitations. How you see yourself, along with how you use what you have, is often more important than talent, skills, or even supernatural abilities. No series I've written has explored this idea more explicitly than the Legion series.
It's interesting that until that point, because I think we brought that up on the first episode, if you read a lot of the Cosmere, you kind of recognize that he does this psychology as superpower thing. Although I don't think I would have articulated like with those words. But I mean, for example, in Stormlight, Shallan, her not actually DID, but her like multiple personalities, her disassociating is very much connected with her power. Like she has illusion powers, and her illusion powers are better or more unique or more potent because of her psychological status. The psychology of Kaladin is really important, although that's a little more in the negative. It's less of assistance and more, but it like interacts with his powers and like how he functions as the superhero he becomes. So the Legion stories are really interesting to kind of really articulate like, no, this is intentional. It's not just he keeps doing this because of some subconscious or even coincidental writing flair, like he's picking up on tropes or things that he has experienced. It's a very intentional, like this is what he's interested in when it comes to like superpowers and magic and all that.
Yeah, our December episode, which will probably be our January episode given the delays. For our Oathbringer episode, my best friend who has DID, who is plural, probably going to come on for an interview for that and talk about how that representation is done. So that'll be fun.
Just finishing a little bit more about how this whole book handles the aspects less stable, like psychological system for Stephen. There's also, we get a lot more examples of when it's kind of breaking and like a little more of an idea of the consequences. Like you have the character Audrey, where her thing is that she like knows she's imaginary. She knows, accepts it, and plays with it. One of our first scenes with her, she is just like when they're all in the white room and they're working the problem, everyone has like whiteboards and stuff. She's just writing in the air, leaving the letters in the air. And Stephen comes over and has to make her stop doing that. Oh, actually, no, there was a clear glass whiteboard there. It wasn't in the air. I think the only thing we got is like he started to feel a headache form. So there's this big implication that something will break in his brain. There'll be some kind of breakdown. There's some kind of thing that goes wrong if he fails to make the hallucinations make sense. There's also the scene where he got kidnapped and his aspects were trying to keep up with him. And there's a brief moment where JC is keeping up with this car going 40 miles per hour. And he does that until it's pointed out to him, also by Audrey, like, oh my God, like, how is he doing that? Stephen realizes, oh, we're going 40 miles per hour. This is impossible. And JC instantly slows down and isn't able to catch up. And there's this line where Stephen's like, I have to maintain the fidelity of the hallucinations. And then just also throughout the book, a lot more lines referencing some of the hoops he has to jump through psychologically to make a lot of the hallucinations like make sense. Like an aspect picked up something on a table, and so Stephen had to stop noticing it actually still being on the table until the aspect put it back down.
Yeah, or he couldn't pick it up until the aspect put it back down.
Yeah, there's much more of this systemization of it, and I think it's more bringing it in line with the Sanderson magic system as a whole as well.
Yeah, I didn't get the sense that this one was as much about authorship and how he sees authorship. I think he just had that in the first book and then got really excited about world building, and then this book was more about world building out his system. He's just interested in putting, like you said, pressure points, Jack.
The last book was a metaphor for authorship. This one it's actually a cool superpower that he wants to explore.
I actually still think that there's a metaphor for authorship here because I'm actually going to quote a very controversial article that a lot of Sanderson fans hate. We're jumping way in the future here, and I'm sorry to use future knowledge, but I actually think this is still a metaphor for authorship specifically because we talk to Arnaud, and Arnaud explains that he thinks that given the many worlds theory, all these aspects existed, and that Stephen just has some connection to these characters in other worlds. I actually think that that's kind of a religious reading. So this is from the Wired article, Brandon Sanderson is Your God. It's not a very good article, for the record. I think it has a couple of meaningful insights, but it mostly just wants to dunk on Sanderson and his fans, which, like, I have done before, unfortunately. But, like, I think that is fine to do as a person in the world, although a bad habit, and it's very bad to do as a journalist. This is the quote that I want to bring up.
Now, you're about to read it, and could you just read it slightly slower?
Sure.
Than you usually read things.
Absolutely. When Mormons ask God for a sign, they speak of a burning in the chest. Say you're a kid wondering if you should be a fantasy writer when you grow up. You ask God what he thinks. If there's a burning in your chest, that's probably a yes. So I press Brandon on the moments he has felt the burning. He says they're too intimate, too special to talk about. That's fine. Let's talk about Mormonism another way. Let's talk about it as it relates to fantasy. Because it's no secret, Mormonism is the fantasy of religion. It is the science fiction edition of Christianity, as I've heard it called, with its angels and alternate histories, embodied gods, visions, and plates made of gold. I asked Sanderson if I've got the ultimate promise of the religion right. The ultimate promise being, as I understand it, that if we humans, if we're good, marry well, and memorize the passcodes, eventually pass into the highest kingdom and come into our divine inheritance, will become gods. Sanderson doesn't balk at the characterization. He agrees that's the gist, and he knows where I'm going. He knows I want to know what he's doing. Writing fantasy books is in fundamentally some way, some very central way, Mormon. Of course it is, he says. The world building, the gods incarnate, the systems of magic. So much of Mormonism is about rules, so are his books, where miracles don't happen unless you put in the work. That's when, between mouthfuls of pork cutlet, Sanderson makes the connection between his work and the work of his heavenly Father. This is where he speaks the 7 words of truth, the only ones I'm certain he has never said in quite this way before. As I build books, Sanderson says, God builds people. So, this line in particular, I thought had a lot of resonance. And also, you can tell that the author is annoying of that article.
Yeah.
That had a lot of resonance to me with the, I am listening to something divine, and like literally the fact of building people. And this is, in some ways it's a psychosis, in some way it's a metaphor for writing still. Just the fact that there's this now divine way of talking about it. I mean, I guess it is. The many worlds theory is not necessarily divine, but the way it's talked about in this book almost is. I think the metaphor for writing is still here. It's still an author discussing craft, but it's also Sanderson going, okay, let's figure out how this magic system works.
Can you break down, you said it was also psychosis, but could you break down that element? Because I feel like I would have questions about what you meant by that.
Not Sanderson's psychosis. I mean, like, Stephen Leeds having hallucinations is a psychosis, but it's also a magic system.
Okay, got it. Because I definitely read it the other way, and I was like...
No, I do not believe that any writing that you take on creatively is psychosis, for the record.
I think the more we do this project, we've referenced Sanderson's Mormonism and how it connects and influences and stuff. The problem I have with that article's framing of things is the more time I spend thinking about this, the more I'm not 100% comfortable with the very one-to-one connection. Like, oh, Sanderson is Mormon, Mormons believe this, so this is how he therefore thinks about writing and why he does writing, compared to obviously the more nuanced view, which is no, the fact that he's Mormon definitely has influences to the way he thinks and sees the world and his craft. But yeah, no, that article writer does sound a little annoying.
Well, yes, I think that is a weakness of our show, is we don't know much about Mormonism. We've made some of the like more broader stuff we've talked about, but there's lots of details that we just don't know. And that's fine, because I think that while Mormonism is often treated as a skeleton key for Sanderson, it obviously isn't the only one. There are many ways to read these books apart from the one-to-one religious ones. What else do we have to say about Legion? Because that was like my big idea of, I think that in some ways this is a metaphor for Sanderson's faith and also Sanderson's writing.
I guess I have like 2 things I want to talk about, and Taylor, let me know if you have things to talk about too. One is, just like the first book, we get a lot of discussion about religion. And there's this scene between Stephen and Dion when they're in the basement. They're basically waiting for the assassin to come back and kill them. They have a whole conversation about death. Panos, the guy who died, and they're looking for his body, and his brother Dion, they're the children of a very traditional, faithful Greek Orthodox family who very much still believe, while the 2 of them, the sons, are atheist. And this is kind of connected to their like biotech scientific background. There's a little bit of a connection between those 2. Oh, they're scientists and therefore they're atheist, which I don't necessarily agree with, but that's like a big theme throughout this book. And while they're in the basement, Stephen asks Dion, like, hey, like, are you scared of death? He's like, yes, of course. And Stephen actually starts trying to give him reasons why, like, not to be scared of death, even when it doesn't include believing in God. That's where the Infinite Batman joke comes in, where he talks about the many worlds theory. He's like, well, yeah, like, you might die, but if the universe is infinite and anything can happen, like, anything that can happen will happen again just by probability and statistics, that means you will live again just on a different world. And maybe in that world, you're Batman. Maybe everyone was Batman. There's infinite Batmans, which it really interesting for me to read because, and this isn't to like dunk on Sanderson in any way, but it's a spirituality attached to physics that I feel like I remember hearing the first time when I was like 13 and finding that deeply not comforting. And I wonder, because we made this comparison in the previous Legion book about how a lot of those plot lines of the first Legion book would totally make sense and not feel weird in a fantasy book, but when they're in a book that happens in the real world, suddenly it's like, wait, what? And here, like this discussion about religion, I'm wondering if we were to take the discussions of Sazed, for example, discussing religion and faith, and not talking about faith in this fictional world with fictional gods and fictional people in history, and apply that outside, is it likewise kind of skin deep discussion of faith once you actually put it in the context of the world and faiths and scenarios we're actually familiar with?
Yeah, there is a lot of interesting stuff that sort of gets revealed with Sanderson's ideology once you put it against a real world system or a real world setting. Because we mentioned this in the first episode of like the character of JC. If you put JC in a, say, like the Stormlight Archive, I think that character would be really funny to have in the Stormlight Archive, of someone who is constantly questioning the establishment and is super paranoid, and like putting a conspiracy theorist in that text in that way would, I think, really work. However, when you put him into like he's a megalomaniac conspiracy theorist in the real world, it's like, okay, well, obviously Sanderson doesn't know this is going to happen because he's writing this in 2010, 2011, but like those are the people who run the government now, unfortunately.
That's your uncle at Thanksgiving.
No, fair.
Yeah, like these are people in the world. And suddenly, like, when you put these sort of characters that he likes to write in the real world, it rubs up in a way that doesn't work as well. I actually think this conversation about faith, while very silly, is actually okay. I think most of the faith stuff in this is actually interesting. It reads to me as very Mormon. We don't get Stephen's religion, but I do think that if you are reading closely, you can assume that he's Mormon. There's a lot of elements of, for example, Ivy doesn't have a specific religion that she's a part of, but she respects all religions, and that reads to me as Mormon because, like Sazed, they believe that all other religions have some truthful thing in them. So the idea of like, oh, she's Greek Orthodox, that's not mine, but it's a good one, read to me as very Mormon, because I think Ivy, like, basically verbatim says that at one point.
I think when I was reading this, I was definitely getting a little bit more hung up on the silly details and less thinking about the implications of faith and authorship and stuff like that. The things I highlighted and were interested in were things like this new strange obsession with women being a blind spot for him was like a plot point in this book. Because he was betrayed by a woman in the last book, so now all women are like worthy of trust immediately or something. It was like,
we still know nothing about this betrayal woman.
Okay, good, because I was so confused. I was like, who are we talking about? Was she in the last book? Because I totally don't remember that. Oh my god, that makes so much more sense.
She was referenced because that was why he might have wanted the camera. Because the camera could maybe help him find her.
Oh my god.
She was referenced in the first book, but still as this mysterious backstory character.
So, for example, one of the things that I think is possible... Okay, so let's make some cold shots about Sandra. Because the options are, she's someone who understands whatever magic system Stephen has. Or she's someone else with the same thing. Which do you think is more likely?
Honestly, I didn't even think about that second option, but this is just going off of what I see Sanderson do in a lot of his books. I think the second one's more likely, that she has the same power.
Yeah, it's one of those two. And do we think that she's going to be more like... She's obviously a romantic interest. Basically, my question is she going to work more like characters where we've seen them have a romance and that tying into the magic system? Like Vin and Elend, part of their romance is... I'm a better Allomancer than you, let me teach you how to do this? Or do we think it's going in sort of the play that you get on that? Or do we think it's going to be more Vin and Kelsier or a Kelsier and Gemmel, where it's like, I know how this works, let me show you what you can do? And I don't know, I'm kind of interested to see where that goes.
I think it's going to be a she still loves him, but something about them being together was like making their powers or making it so they couldn't achieve the potential of their powers.
Oh, God.
This book makes a suggestion that there's the whole like Stephen wants to find her. And I can't remember if it was Ivy or some other character points out like, hey, have we considered the fact that she's trying not to be found is a signal? Maybe we should not look for her and we should respect that.
Yeah.
This mysterious backstory character is very like there's a couple lines of her in each book. And they don't really dig in.
It's so bizarre, though.
Yes.
Like, I think that because, I mean, at the end of the day, if we're thinking about it broadly, what he's saying, if she does have the same powers, is that two authors should never marry each other, which...
I mean, that's funny to take it to that place. I was not even thinking about it like that part of the metaphor.
They actually should avoid each other at all costs. Taylor, this will be the last time we speak.
We can't reach our full potential if we're together, if we're friends.
I have a different thing of like, I mentioned before we started that the structure of this book is very, very similar. The structure of this book is very, very similar. You have the one says they're here for Stephen in one way, but are manipulating him and have an ulterior motive. And then the book sort of plays out very similarly of we get to a certain point in the investigation and then it's dismantled by someone showing up with a gun. You know, that's fine for it to be formulaic. I actually think that's a strength of this book. There are tons of formulaic pulp novels that you could pick up. I think that actually Legion could be a totally fine series, but the fact that it's so autobiographical and self-inserty for Sanderson means that he sometimes goes off and does something that's insane to read. But if he was just sort of writing these as a serialized story of like, oh, yeah, let me pick up the new Stephen Leeds, like if I was picking up the new Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
That would be totally fine of like, oh, let's see what Tobias and Stephen are up to these days. I think that is something that could have worked. But like, this is all very noir. The woman who got away, who was a part of my mysterious past. But I don't think that like Sanderson is fully equipped to write a good noir. And that's fine. I wish that he was leaning more into sort of different styles of detective fiction. I think that this genuinely, if you were writing this in the style of a Batman, that would be fine.
We do know he's good. He's capable of writing really good mysteries. We talked about this all the way back in Elantris.
Mm-hmm.
The puzzle box, I don't know, like the mystery of the world, like there's some kind of like secret history or magic going on.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's great at those. Like, I think he genuinely is fucking fantastic. Writing, oh, everyone thinks the magic works this way, but there's something weird happening. And oh, you discover there's actually this history of gods and the magic really works this way and you have to use it to be the bad guy. He's great at that. We saw that with Elantris. We saw that with Mistborn. It hasn't really happened in Stormlight yet, but that's happening in Stormlight. But
you can feel it building. Yeah.
No, there is absolutely a mystery in Stormlight. There's several central mysteries. Like, we haven't gotten a detective story in Stormlight yet, of, like, the way that we may have gotten it in Elantris or Mistborn. But, like, there's a big central mystery of why did the Knights Radiant go away?
Oh, no, that's what we were saying. Like, it's building. We haven't gotten that story yet. Like, well...
I don't know. I mean,
yes.
Immediately spoilers for Words of Radiance, but I thought that the finding of the Oath Gates was like a giant solved mystery of the world that was really interesting to me. And then we actually made it to like, oh, Irithiru came to me.
Yeah.
Brief tangent about Starlight. It is funny rereading those books because to me, when I'm 3 books further and those things have become mundane, normal parts of the story, like, oh yes, of course, they're using the Oath Gates again. This tool they've now found and had for 3 books.
Yeah.
I forget how shocking and new it was. I'm reading it again and I'm just like, ah, yes, of course. The Oath Gates. That thing I'm super familiar with.
The other thing that I wanted to bring up unless Taylor, you had more of that point.
I think I had something, but I forgot it.
Okay.
Oh, I remember. I think that Sanderson does have a bit of a blind spot when it comes to writing in the real world. I think that he definitely does a lot better when he's writing in a new world for stuff like puzzle boxing. And I think that the puzzle box just isn't the same when he's writing in the real world because... he doesn't get to play around, I think. I feel like he thinks he can't play around with as many elements or, like, there's just some sort of... it just doesn't hit the same. Like, do you agree? Like, I feel like his Cosmere stuff just hits very differently than his non-Cosmere stuff that usually takes place on Earth.
Yeah. When it's his world, he can tinker with it.
And also, like, as we've said, when he works with the real world, it kind of feels like conspiratorial thinking.
Yeah.
The other one that I wanted to bring up, just going back a little bit, the everyone has their own psychosis, and I just thought of this because I was thinking of relating these to other books. The everyone has their own psychosis feels like Steelheart.
Yes.
The fact that he doubled down on that after writing Steelheart really felt connected. And like another moment of the method is paying off.
Yeah. And related, we are reading Firefight next month, and I'm very excited for that.
I wonder if this is an example of, because this will happen to me with my own writing or like world building for like RPGs and stuff. But it's one of those things where as you continue to create and write, you realize what you're interested in. Like you look back and you be like, oh, that's what I was working with. The Legion series is the first time he consciously realized, oh, that's what I like psychology as superpower. And then you get to Steelheart, which was him being like, and now I'm doing this on purpose. And that's why it feels way more explicit because he's realized it and he's now doing it on purpose versus previously, which is just a thing that came up.
Yes.
I want to make a point also because I was just thinking about what I just said about him not having as much of a puzzle box or not being as savvy when he's writing in the real world. It made me think of this quote by V.E. Schwab, and I'm sure other authors have thought of it before, but I just know that she said it at one point where she likes to think of magic in the real world as either it's secretly happening, you think that everything's mundane, but there's this secret other people that are doing something else or like supernatural that's happening on the side, or magic as like a wardrobe and where like it looks mundane on the outside, but when you step in, there's a whole nother world to find. And it's interesting that like she thinks of it as those two kind of ways that are the most fun to play around with, because I feel like Sanderson isn't in like either of those. Like I don't think that's how he thinks of how you can kind of grip a reader into thinking how fun the magic is like in a real world. I don't know. I think that maybe if he had like, that's just not his framing. And so like I feel like that's why it doesn't, at least in my personal tastes, it doesn't hit the same way.
No, absolutely. Because I think a lot of what he's interested in terms of systems is how do these systems interact and what's the outer edges, what are these sorts of things? And then there's less room for that. Like, how does my magic system interact with this real world political structure is how you end up with the first Legion book. And that's not very good.
Well, because he's not even trying to do like doing fantasy in the real world, but not what a lot of fantasy authors will do, which is either alt history or a secret other world.
Yeah.
Where it makes sense because it's a below the surface. What you see with like Harry Potter, what you see with like Percy Jackson, like these fantasy that really work in the real world. With that he's done before, Alcatraz.
Alcatraz isn't really in the real world, though.
Yeah.
It started that way, yeah.
We all thought it was going to be in the real world, but like as soon as they enter a library in San Francisco, immediately they are in a weird gonzo otherworld.
Which was like his take on, you know, the Harry Potter type of thing, but it just wasn't. Yeah. And then the other side of it, like other than the Harry Potter style or Percy Jackson style, is like the Twilight style where like Forks, like Washington, exists and you could go there and you wouldn't know that there's this whole other society and brewing thing happening under the surface and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And there's just no world in which I am grounded enough to believe that Stephen Leeds could be a real guy that is in, I don't even, like, it's not grounded enough for me to even, like, where does he live? I don't even know. I don't remember. Pennsylvania? I feel like Pennsylvania is coming to me.
I don't know if it's mentioned.
I always thought Midwest for some reason.
Right? So that's what I'm saying.
I was getting West Coast.
Oh,
so.
Really? I was really like, he's in Pennsylvania somewhere, like on the coast.
Well, actually, no. This book, I was definitely thinking closer to West Coast because like the Silicon Valley vibe of all the big tech companies. There's like all these big tech companies he's dealing with.
That's fair. It's just like, it would be interesting to see this book a little bit more grounded in a location the way that Steelheart was attempted to be grounded in Chicago, though we talked about how there was kind of a lack of love for like Chicago landmarks that should have been there and discussed.
Yeah. Oh, other thing that I wanted to bring up, I love that Sanderson is so Mormon. It's not just the Mormonism, but we have Ivy constantly talking about people's languages. For the record, we never get anything beyond like a hell or a damn in this book. It's not like Stephen Leeds is suddenly like, holy fuck, or anything like that. The swearing is all very normal, but I love the idea that he's so uncomfortable with swearing that JC at a certain point is like, JC hears this theory from Arnaud of the many worlds theory, and JC is like, well, I'm from the future. And he introduces his own system of future swears. And I love that even in his book set in the real world, Sanderson is like, well, I have to have a fake swearing somehow.
That's funny. That's really funny.
Ugh, you're so right.
Do we have any other big thoughts about Legion?
Big thoughts, not really. Like, it was a mystery book, but kind of how Graham said, it was basically the same beat for beat plot. It was a lot of Stephen getting details, but more or less just reacting to things happening to him as he moved around. And then eventually having the big realization at the end of where the body was.
When we got to the end of the last Legion, both of you were very, very excited about the next one. Do you still feel that same way?
I was going to say I'm excited for book 3 because I think that one has the potential to be insane. This one actually made me, like, I wish this was something more serialized and casual than, like, Sanderson working through some of his deep thoughts in a lot of ways, because this was the first time that I saw something that I was like, oh, there's something really fun in here that could have worked as its own thing. As I read it, I was like, this is fine. And I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. This is going to be very middle of the road, Sanderson. I'm excited for book 3 because, we have to get an explanation on Sandra, and I bet that's going to be crazy.
I was saying, yeah, you're right. It was middle of the road. And that is very refreshing after reading a lot of short stories last year that seemed to not have that much effort put into them. I'm glad that this one had effort and was readable.
I was like sort of joking about it earlier, but the thing that made me excited about a sequel to Legion was because the first Legion was so shockingly unexpected in how crazy it was. And this one it was like more competent in a way that was almost disappointing when I was hoping for more Legion 1 insanity.
Yes.
But no, I do think I actually genuinely enjoyed reading this. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that I went in like expecting this is a Legion book. I know how weird this can get. I'm here for the ride. But like Graham, I think I'm definitely looking forward to the next book, which is basically going to be the tell-all. I assume we're going to learn as much as we're going to learn about his superpower.
Yes, and I think that this marks the end of the trilogy of the Sanderson Legions. I think someone else writes another Legion that he co-writes. And we'll get to that later and see what that looks like.
Maybe that's more serialized, yeah.
We will see. I know that one's an audiobook exclusive, I think.
I'm interested, that you guys are still excited about the third one, because it seems like when we got to this Legion and it wasn't as buck wild, that you guys kind of lost a little bit of steam. So I'm about equal because I wasn't... Legion has not really interested me that much from the beginning, so I will read it. But like, why did you write this, man? What?
On that note, do we want to move on to Allomancer Jak?
Yeah, let's do that.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, this one was weird.
I thought it was fun. I thought that the playing around with POV, and I'm assuming your notes about the audiobook is because the fun part of this was the footnotes, and I'm not sure how they incorporated the footnotes in the audiobook.
We'll get into that after we get through the major summary.
Okay, let's do that. Also, we decided to not do one-sentence summaries. Ones are also short stories, but once we get back to a novel next time, we can bring it back. Because I am not prepared, but also I just noticed that we didn't do that again. Oops.
I think that's fine the novellas are often so thin that, Allomancer Jak is like 25 pages? It's
very
not
short,
really...
yeah.
It's not really built for a one-sentence summary. Although, I bet our summary is long, given that there's a lot of weird fiddly details.
It's, like, definitely one of the shortest I've written, because I cut out... a lot of it is jokes.
Yeah.
We'll have to talk about the footnotes on their own, because there are details in the footnotes that I just, like, didn't include because they were, like, I don't know. We can, like, fill those back in when I'm done reading this. Allomancer Jak in the Pits of Altania is episode 28 through 30 of the serialized newspaper publication that appears between chapters in the second era of the Mistborn novels. Allomancer Jak is an adventurer across the roughs, or the Wild West of this setting. He writes down his mostly exaggerated tales so that they can be published back in Elendel. This episode picks up right where the last one ended, though we will likely never read episodes 1 through 28. Allomancer Jak is stuck in a cave in the middle of a Koloss clan. He had defeated the largest of the Koloss and is now confused why they are treating him like a prisoner instead of a king. Immediately, the reader will notice the snarky footnotes. These are made by Jak's travel companion, the terraceman Handerwim. Jack is also worried about the fate of the woman he travels with, the fair Alessandra Dramali. Allomancer Jack, having lost all of his tin, somehow finds a vein of tin exposed in the cave wall and decides to lick it. This, again, somehow works, and a crow shows up in the cave, and Jack speaks with it, claiming it's Lindip, his spirit guide. The crow tells him that he thinks the Koloss threw him in jail because Jack used a gun to kill the challenger Koloss. Miraculously, it was raining at the time, and with his tin, Jack spotted a river that had grown tall enough with the rain that he could jump in. That's the end of episode 28. In episode 29, Jack survives his dip in the river, but is immediately taken by the Koloss again. The Koloss take him to an oasis, the location of the survivor's treasure, which Jack had been looking for throughout this series. The pool is shaped like a spearhead, and the rocks beneath him had patterns in them that could be mistaken for bloody footprints, which... There's like this, we'll talk about that there's like this thing he's following. What is it called? Prophecy. He's following this prophecy. Okay, back to the summary. Jack meets the ancient Koloss. In the first era of Mistborn, Koloss weren't allowed to grow old enough that they rip through all of their skin. But these ancients are true giants, held together by bandages and completely ripped apart but still living. The Koloss ancients tell him that by the will of the daughter of the one he had killed, Jack will be turned into a Koloss. When Jack asks who this daughter is, his travel companion and love interest, Alessandra Dramali, reveals herself to be Koloss-blooded. As Koloss were all once human, Koloss-blooded are the children of the Koloss, but are not full Koloss until they decide they want to undergo the Koloss transformation. Alessandra's skin is a light shade of blue, and she reveals that she's been using makeup and gloves to hide her heritage this whole time. Alessandra reveals the challenger that Jack killed was her mother, but that she will not mourn her, and that Alessandra has been telling them that she doesn't want Jack to become full Koloss, but they won't listen to her. The Koloss demands that he stop talking and face his fate. Jack bluffs, telling the Koloss that he already is Koloss. He argues that only a Koloss could kill the Koloss challenger, but they argue that he used a gun. So Jack declares that he will prove he is a Koloss by diving for the treasure of the survivor. Jack grabs a large rock and dives into the pool. He descends down the dark deep, only able to see when he flares his tin. At the bottom, he finds a metal strongbox. In the strongbox, he finds a bladder he can fill with the last of the air in his lungs, which brings him and the box back to the surface. In the strongbox are new spikes the Koloss can use to grow their clan. They rejoice, but Jack is a bit disappointed. That is, until he realizes that the box is made of pure aluminum, a very rare treasure indeed. The story ends with Jack and Alessandra happily walking off into the sunset, completely forgetting about their friend Hinderwim. I feel like I read that in the way that it was written.
Yes.
All of it was very like, oh my god, and like there was like obvious plot holes, but it was like, that's the point. And like Hinterwim in his footnotes will be like, this is a plot hole, and I tried to tell him and he won't listen to me.
It's kind of funny because it's basically just, it feels like Sanderson had a lot of fun with those newspaper blurbs between chapters in Alloy of Law and just wanted to expand. It's a very, very pulpy little Mistborn adventure, like really leaning into like, oh, we're doing Mistborn in the quote unquote Wild West. Cool, we're going to have a pulpy adventure story reminiscent of that era of literature.
Yeah. This is where the story sort of breaks down a little bit for me, because I feel like it... Do the two of y'all know the expression a hat on a hat?
Yes.
Okay.
Could you explain it anyways?
Yeah. A hat on a hat is a comedy writer thing. The joke is essentially you have two jokes that are individually funny, but you put them together and it's kind of too much. For example, you have someone who is wearing two silly hats. You don't need more than one silly hat, because you put a hat on top of the hat. You can't see that one is funny anymore. And then later on, I'm sort of like, I actually think this is a hat on a hat on a hat. Because I think that an era to serial adventure radio play, or someone giving academic and historical footnotes, putting a legend into context, both of those would make a good short story, but together is kind of obnoxious to me. And then there's the third additional thing of like, oh, this is kind of just like a Koloss lore Bible. And like, I kind of would have just been interested on that on its own, of like reading the wiki about the new Koloss entry.
This was very much a story, and I think it said so as much in like what I've been able to find online about it.
The postscript.
Oh, the postscript. Yeah, I don't think I read the postscript, but yeah, no. This story was also an opportunity just to be like, hey, here's what Koloss are.
Yeah.
In the new Mistborn world, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like they're still around, they still exist. Here's how there's more of them, etc.
Yeah, in the postscript, I'm not sure if this was in the... Oh, maybe it was in the footnotes. They were talking about how Kolos exists now and like how people who feel ostracized by society will venture into the roughs to undergo Kolos transformation so that they could, live apart from society in that way.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting racial politics in this of like, okay, maybe we want to go more into, or should I go into this point, or should we save it after we've discussed more of the actual book?
I think go ahead.
The two sort of racial politics that I want to talk about is, one, I'm secretly a Kolos. That really feels sort of out of the tradition. I don't think Sanderson is doing this intentionally. I think he is reading stuff that is in this vein and is accidentally recreating something that has sort of a dark history. When I say the term passing, I think a lot of people think of it in the term of straight passing, queer passing, of like, I'm a queer person who can move in a straight space because I don't look visibly queer. But initially, it has the history of racial passing, of I am a person of color who looks white enough that I can move in a white space. And there are lots of plays and novels where the sort of tragic reveal is, oh no, my romantic interest is secretly black. I can't believe this. And that's sort of like, this is both a slur and also the title of this play, so I'm going to apologize in advance for saying this, but there is a play called The Octoroon, which is very famously, that's the sort of plot of the play, is secretly this beautiful woman is a black woman, and she's 1/8 black. And I'm sorry for saying that, but like, that's sort of where this tradition is coming out of. And you see this in sort of the pulps and Indiana Jones style stuff of the serial radio play, where that sort of thing is bundled up in all of that too. And I'm sorry to take it to like a dark place with this like largely fun serial radio adventure, but that's an interesting thing to put into your book. I think that reveal is kind of bad because it's in this sort of racist tradition. However, the stuff of like the Kolos living separate from society and their society actually being kind of good and interesting, and them being nonviolent now and having huge respect for their elders and having to come up with ways to deal with their new advanced age, all that stuff is good. I actually think all that is sort of interesting Sanderson working in the vein of writing an indigenous culture that, he has hits and misses on. I think all that stuff is good. Just the larger stuff of running into this specific racial tradition is bad.
I definitely picked up a little bit on the racial tradition you were talking about, but I wasn't thinking about it in the, I'm part black. I was thinking more specifically the version of it, which is, I'm a white, explorer in indigenous lands, but I actually do know what the deal is with the indigenous people. I'm actually like part of them. That's how I can like work in these indigenous spaces. Like that specific tradition, which I've seen a lot. The, white boy shows up and like has a spirit guide, and so everyone goes wild.
White boy shocks Mexican restaurant by speaking fluent Spanish.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
I mean, like, yeah, it's very Dances with Wolves. It's very, very Pocahontas, Disney's Pocahontas for the record, and also very Avatar.
Yeah.
And like, of course, all those things are operating in their own traditions as well. But yeah, that was a weird thing. Although, one thing I actually really like about it that I think is huge improvement on that sort of thing of like, oh no, this woman I'm interested in is secretly a person of color. Jack is actually super okay with that. Like, they still ride off into the sunset together. And I also like the fact that she has a choice on whether or not she wants to become a full Kolos. She's like, I'm actually fine being Kolos-blooded, not a full Kolos. All that was fun.
Yeah, that is the nice ending. It's not, well... It shouldn't have ever been tragic, but it, this ends in a nice way.
Say Sanderson was writing in 1920 instead of
exactly
the 2010s. The ending of this would have been, oh, she's secretly a Kolos and she's forced to become a full blood and that sort of thing.
Oh, definitely. And I think if this was, if this was longer than 25 pages, that would definitely, I think that was probably a tension that would have been built on a bit more. But since this is so silly and goofy and like we need to keep it moving.
Yes.
The threat of like the screaming woman in Godzilla, like they were like, oh no, like bad things are going to happen to me. But like everyone like knows that the damsel in distress is going to get saved by the...
Yes. It's also worth noting that the official art for Jack is straight up just Indiana Jones.
Do you mean in the he's like a little bit more rough, I thought, like in the book I'm reading, or the art that's in Arcanum Unbounded. This one?
Yeah.
He's got long hair.
Yeah, he does have long hair.
Maybe
I'm looking at a piece of fan art, but he has an Indiana Jones hat in a lot of the fan art I'm seeing.
Oh, I love that.
But So maybe I am reading into it something that is not there. But, like, you know, this feels very Indiana Jones. And, of course, those are working off the same sorts of serials.
Yeah.
I don't know that I have much more to say about this. I do personally find the little snarky footnotes funny. I find that, like, genre trope funny.
Yeah. I think it's hard to talk about because, A, we know that Jack's point of view is extremely skewed and extremely exaggerated. What actually even happened that day, we will never know. And B, we won't, unless I'm wrong, I believe we will probably never meet Allomancer Jack as a character in the second Mistborn series. Like, he's not going to show up to Wax and Wane and, like, be an integral part of, like, solving a crime. So, like, there's a lot less connection there where you, like, I don't necessarily need to, like, connect fully with whatever's going on here because it's cool that there's a full aluminum box now available in this world, but I don't believe that that's going to come up, or if it does, it wouldn't be relying.
If it does, it's going to be something of like Wax thinks about Allomancer Jack in a chapter. They're not going to have a conversation.
Which, doesn't he already do that in the first one? Wasn't there some allusion to like Wax having a poor opinion of Allomancer Jack because he just makes up stories? Or am I misremembering that?
I think that is something that we have not got to yet, because I don't think Allomancer Jack existed in the Alloy.
Yeah, he did.
Other than in the blurbs.
Yeah, he was in the newspaper blurbs. Yeah.
Did he?
That's where he came from. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I read all the newspapers because I thought they were cute and fun.
I think the newspaper blurbs may have not been in the audiobook I listened to.
Yeah, it was just looked like it was like a picture of a newspaper and like much of it was cut off. Like there wasn't actually a story of like Allomancer Jack. There was like one column that was like half cut off where you could see like some adventure was happening, but you couldn't really tell anything that was going on. And then it was like headlines about what was going on in Ellendale and stuff like that. And that was like kind of the extent of it. There was not like a second story you could follow if you like paid attention to the newspapers between chapters.
I'm sure like something like that will come back again, but I don't think he's going to be we're not going to have a chapter where Wax shows up at Renette's.
And the aluminum box is there, and that's what we use to save the day.
Yeah, no.
Beat Miles' 100 lives to death with. Because if you use aluminum weapons, he can't heal.
I don't think that Sanderson is fully above that thing. I think it would just be silly for Allomancer Jack to show up. Because I think he knows that, like, you can't put the comedy joke character into the same story as, like, your big serious character.
Yeah.
Because I don't know. It would be like having a Spaceballs character in Star Wars. That's
you'd have to humanize him. You'd have to make him like a charlatan, and then like I don't know. I'd love to see Elisandra though. She seems fun as hell.
Sure, why not?
Sanderson, please give us just a full book of like a full real book of these characters.
I don't need a full real book of it. Like particularly with I'll explain the footnotes in the audiobook real quick. Basically the footnotes get read immediately, so it's like it's interrupting the narrative. It's not like a sort of thing where you can read the whole full page and then go down to the bottom of the page and read the footnotes. It's blah 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 blah. Actually, that didn't happen.
Yeah,
blah 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 blah. So it was really annoying to listen.
I mean,
to.
I read them that way because most of the time the footnotes were responding to dialogue too. He was like, "Did I find the survivor's treasure?" And then like you go down to the footnotes and it's like, "Yep." And then you go back to the thing, and I was like, he's lying. And then you keep going, and you're like, he wasn't lying. What's going on? Why would you write that? Why would you?
Mm-hmm.
Even, like, in character, as, like, someone who's writing the footnotes and, like, trying to make this interesting for the more sophisticated bound edition readers, it still doesn't, whatever. He did what he did. Sanderson did what he did.
Yeah. I've been spoiled forever on good footnotes in books of, like, fictional footnotes with Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. All time
Oh my
are
God,
there.
I'm about to read that.
But I'm so excited for you. I hope you like it so much. It strikes me as sort of a insecure move in writing. And I don't think Sanderson is insecure. I think he did this because he has a sense of humor that differs from mine. But oftentimes, whenever I read a piece of writing where someone is drawing attention to how dumb a trope is, I'm like, you're the one writing this genre trope into your story. You could have written something else. Showing that you understand that this is sort of a weak piece of writing does not make it less weak.
I would like to refer our audience to the bathos and lampshading episodes of Overly Sarcastic Productions Trope Talk.
Oh, yeah, that'd be a good place to go. I like those folks. As I said, it's a hat on a hat. If you had one or the other of these, I would probably enjoy both of those. Do we have any other Allomancer Jack thoughts? Because I've hit my 4 points that I had.
Yeah, I think I don't really have much else to say. I am really looking forward to when we actually do go back to Mistborn. I think Shadows of Self is going to be a lot of fun.
Yes, we are.
I mean, we're doing that in April.
We're reading books 2 and 3 this year, so that's very exciting.
And we're reading them almost back to back.
Yes. If not back to back, then almost back to back.
I'm going to rank Legion.
Me too.
We don't have much for in terms of the this year ranking. I'm going to put it below 6 of the Dusk.
What was Dreamer again? Oh my god, I don't even remember. It was last month.
Cops and Robbers. The Cops and Robbers with Ghosts.
Honestly, I'm putting it below that. But above Way of Kings Prime.
I think I'd put it above Way of Kings Prime too. I just found Way of Kings Prime just sort of boring.
Me
Like
too.
interesting from a like crafts perspective. Like if I just found this book, I would be like, okay, this is kind of boring.
Yeah. I'm going to put it above Shadows for Silence, which it puts it like just below Dead Middle, because my Dead Middle is The Alloy of Law.
Legion Skin Deep?
Yeah. Like, I don't think it was very good, but I also was more annoyed by, like, The Arithmetist.
We have very different rankings.
We do. I don't think it's actively good, but it's also not a book that annoyed me, like The Arithmetist or Infinity Blade Awakening. Yeah, I reserve the right to change my rankings later on, but right now it's...
I'm not doing that. I'm doing, like, whatever I felt in the moment when I was, like, most fresh on how I felt it went. I'm trusting that version of myself to put that in. And that's just what we have as my master rankings.
Again, like, I don't think that this is the best Sanderson work, but it was largely inoffensive. It went down easy. And I don't know, I think that this is another one where it's like, for those of you who are really interested in Sanderson as a writer, this is another one that you should probably read. Because, like, there is a lot of that Sanderson theory of fiction and Sanderson theory of writing in there.
It's in 17 out of 21 on mine master book rankings, which I did not include. I didn't include any short stories that I knew I wouldn't remember. We read Dreamer last month and I was like,
already forgot
what
it.
even
Yeah.
is Dreamer? I don't remember what Dreamer was. I did put it above The Last Legion and above Infinity Blade, but below all of the Alcatraz books because I think I'd still like the Alcatraz books better than Legion Skin Deep.
I think I'm similar.
So yeah, we don't have a Hoyd spotting this episode because there was no
Or
Hoyd.
next episode. We're still on the no Cosmere kick. I mean, Allomancer Jak is Cosmere, but
25 pages of
like
it.
our big thing that we
Yeah.
are, the big thing we're reading.
We'll be on such a Cosmere kick for so long, though, for the rest of this year. Once we hit May, it's Cosmere all the way until December.
I'm really looking forward to it. I feel like the last year was the year of just lots of like weird side projects.
I agree.
I am ready for back into the meat of Sanderson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're also not really going to have like a double episode. We had 3 books in January, 3 books in February, and we're not thankfully going to have that again until August, which I'm looking forward to. I like it when we just kind of go real deep into one piece of text.
Yes. Oh, also, just as a broad thing, we are debating on the Elantris 10th anniversary edition because I think we still want to do that episode, but we may just remove it from the main order and do it with a guest later. And that might be several months later. It might be a while later. We haven't fully decided.
Okay.
But yeah,
That's a good idea because we have it in June right now.
we have it in June. And like, I think something that we should probably do is read the introduction to that edition and just mention it on the podcast. But I think that full episode would really benefit from having someone who has not read a Sanderson book before.
I would definitely be willing to move it around to accommodate a guest because I think that is a lot more interesting than just hearing us talk about Elantris again. Just
Yeah.
the 3 of us.
And I do think it is important that we reread Elantris.
Yes.
Just because I think it would be really fun to get this far on and then return to the first one and see how different
Absolutely.
and how in line it is. But it doesn't necessarily have to be when the 10th anniversary edition came out. But we should flag it in our June-July episode of like, this is what the introduction said. Do we have anything else we want to say?
I'm good.
I don't think so. Join us for Firefight, the second book in the Steelheart series. and the Reckoners. Yes, I am honestly looking forward to that because Firefight was revealed to be someone very interesting in the end of Steelheart, so I think it'll be great.
Anyway, thank you all so much for listening. We'll be back here next month with Firefight. Until then, grab a book and hit the beat.
Grab a hook at the beach.
Grab a book and hit the beat.
A Grain of Sanderson is created by Graham Gilman, Taylor Lane, and Jack McLaughlin. I edited and produced this episode. Our logo is done by our exceptionally talented friend Ven Busby. Our theme music is Goodnight Kiss by 2Mellow off the album Midnight Broadcasts. You can find their work at 2mellow.net, that's the number 2, MELLO, and 2mellowmakes at bandcamp.com. If you'd like to support us further, you can do that in the following ways. First, please tell your friends about this podcast. Share on Discord, send an email to your grandmother, write a thoughtful post on social media, or otherwise telling your friends and family really help us out. You can follow us on Instagram, or buy a book from our bookshop, of which we see a small cut. Finally, if you'd like to contribute to us the most directly, we have a Patreon. Those links are in the episode description. Questions, critiques, or pasta recipes? Please write us an email at agrainofsanderson@gmail.com or join our Discord, a link available in our show notes. Thank you so much for listening.